And welcome. Thank you for joining me in part number 156 of this fabulous book, Muhammad Sal'lal'laa'hu A'lay'hi Was'sal'lam, his life based on the earlier sources. We are busy with part number 156, with chapter number 51, where the Prophet Sal'lal'laa'hu A'layhi Was'sallam is now marching towards Uhud. As what you mentioned very briefly, Prophet Sal'lal'laa'hu A'layhi Was'sallam had a dream that he should rather stay within the walls of Medina, but then dissent arose, and then the people decided no, they would rather march out. Prophet Sal'lal'laa'hu A'layhi Wassallam put on his armor. Then the people regretted, and he said, no, once I put on the armor, we need to go out. And he told him, we need to be steadfast, meaning that if I give you instruction to do something, follow it. Don't chop and change like what the archers did, a very big mistake. So as they were setting out, there were 1,000 people among the soldiers. And let's continue the story from there. As what I mentioned in the earlier episode, about 300 of the hypocrites, led by Abdullah ibn Ubay, then abandoned the march towards Uhud. And the Prophet ﷺ then went to 700 people against an army of 3,000. The sun was already setting when they reached Shaykhan, halfway between Medina and Uhud. Bilal radiallahu anhu made the call to prayer, and they prayed, after which the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam reviewed his troops as was his wont and his behavior. It was then that he noticed the presence of 8 boys who, despite their age, were hoping to take part in the battle. Amongst them was Zayd ibn Haritha's son Usama, right, the adopted grandson of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, Usama, and Umar radiallahu anhu's son Abdullah ibn Umar, both only 13 years old. The Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam ordered them and their 6 friends to return home immediately. The Prophets, they protested, and one of the Ansar, one of the helpers, assured the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam that the 15-year-old Rafi, there was one who was 15-year-old Rafi of the Osad clan of Haritha, was already a better archer than some of his elders. So I said, this guy is very, very skilled in archery, and we'll probably need him, right? So Rafi was allowed to stay, whereupon Sumara, an orphan from one of the Najd tribes, whose mother had married an Ansar, a helper of the Rafi's clan, claimed that he could throw Rafi in wrestling. To say, Ya Nabi, you allowed Rafi to stay because he's very good at archery, but I'm stronger than him. In wrestling, I can easily beat him. So imagine they're on the way to the battlefield, and Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam told the 2 of them, all right, let's have a wrestling match between the 2 of you. Look at the gentleness of Nabi. Look at his cool-headedness. So in front of them, they started the wrestling. And the one who was not allowed to join the battle, he beat that Rafi in the wrestling. But let's continue. Let's read this. So we say, so Rafi was allowed to stay, whereupon Sumara, an orphan from one of the Najd tribes, whose mother had married a helper of the Rafi's clan, claimed that he could throw Rafi in wrestling. The Prophet ﷺ told the 2 boys to show them what they could do in wrestling. So they set about each other, and there and then. And Sumara, the orphan, proved his claim to be true. So he also was allowed to stay, while the others were all sent back home. So the other 6 were all sent back home, and these 2 were then allowed to stay. The Meccans were hoping, the Meccan Quraysh were hoping that the Muslims would come out against them and so enable them to use their... So the Meccan Quraysh were actually waiting. They say, it's dangerous for us to go into Medina. It's a fortress. They can attack us from the roof. They can attack us in the alleys. They know the city in and out. So the Meccan Quraysh were a bit sharp. They say, we'll wait here, let them come out to us, right? And in particular, they had the cavalry to the best possible advantage. Remember, Khalid bin Walid is in charge of the cavalry. So the cavalry wouldn't have been effective in the city walls. The Prophet ﷺ was aware of this, and having nonetheless decided to leave the city, he was determined to compensate for the disparity of numbers by taking up a position which would give his army an advantage and which would at the same time be unexpected and therefore disconcerting to the enemy. But for this purpose, he would need a guide, so he made some inquiries, and since they would have to pass through the territory of the Bani Haritha, he accepted the offered services of a member of that clan who knew the land perfectly. In Medina, meanwhile, that night that young groom were asked to be married, Hanzala and Jamila had consummated their new marriage, and in her sleep during the small hours, Jamila the bride had a dream in which she saw her husband standing at the outside of the door of heaven. And a door opened for him, and he entered through this door, whereupon it then closed behind him. When she awoke, she said to herself, this is martyrdom, this is Shaheed. They performed their ablutions and prayed the dawn prayer together, after which he bade his new bride farewell, not knowing that he won't see her again, subhanAllah. But she clung to him and would not let him go, and again he lay with her. Then he tore himself from her embrace and not even staying to repeat his ablution, he put on his coat of mail, seized his weapons, and hastened away out from the house. The Prophet ﷺ had given instructions that the army should be ready to move off from the Shaykhain shortly before dawn. But Abdullah ibn Ubay, the hypocrite, the chief of the hypocrites, had been in consultation with some of his nearest followers during the night. So at night, they were doing the wheeling and dealing and talking. And when it was time to raise camp the next morning, he turned back to Medina with 300 of the hypocrites and doubters, to the great shame of his son Abdullah, who remained with the army. Ibn Ubay did not even speak to the Prophet ﷺ, and when questioned by some of the Ansar, he said, "He has disobeyed me and obeyed the striplings and men of no judgment. I see not why we should lose our lives in this ill-chosen spot." So he was very arrogant and, saying, "I'm not interested. Why must I even tell the Prophet ﷺ anything? I'm just going back," right? A very arrogant person. So another Abdullah, the father of Jabir, went after him and called out, "I adjure you, I'm appealing to you by God, not to desert your people. What are you doing? Don't desert your people. Don't desert your prophet. While the enemy is looking on, you are giving them the upper hand. What's wrong with you?" But Abdullah ibn Ubay only answered, if we knew that you would be fighting, we would not leave you. But we do not think that there will be a battle. There won't be any battle. So this person said, "Then enemies of God, God will avail his prophet beyond any need." We say, "Okay, we don't really need you, all can go." Right. Reduced now to 700, the army advanced for a short distance towards the enemy, and then, still under cover of the darkness, they moved to the right and made their way across the volcanic tract until they came to the southeasterly end of the gorge of Uhud. Turning again, they advanced northwest up the gorge until in the half-light of dawn, they saw the Meccan camp ahead of them. A little to the left and a little below them, they marched on until they were directly between the enemy and Uhud. Having now reached his objective, which was to have the slope of the ground in his favor, the Prophet ﷺ halted them and dismounted. Bilal radiallahu anhu made the call to the morning prayer, and they moved into lines with their backs in the mountain. Thus was also their formation for the battle, since the enemy were now between them and Mecca. Having led the prayer, the Prophet ﷺ turned and exhorted them, saying, started encouraging them and telling the soldiers, his Sahaba, "Verily, this day you are at a station that is rich in reward and rich in treasure. For him who is mindful of what he is about and who devotes his soul thereunto with patience and with certainty and earnestness and with effort." When he had finished, by the time he had finished his speech, remember the young bridegroom who left his bride behind? He had just went forward to greet him, and he came to greet Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. He had just arrived from Medina. Look at his determination, subhanAllah. So let's join us in the next episode, as I will give you, I think I've got the map somewhere. I don't have it here with me direct. Okay, I've got it here somewhere, but I'll discuss this in detail in the next episode. But this is just briefly the Battle of Uhud, the layout plan, where the Muslims are, where the enemy are, and where the archers are situated, so that inshallah we'll take it forward further in the Battle of Uhud. Stay well, look after yourself. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen.